you ready to master the waves of medical device product development? Well, wax up your surfboard because you are listening to Inspired by Imua. And here is your medical device product development expert, that Hawaiian-hearted hostess who will help you hang 10, Meghan Alonso.
And aloha. You're listening to Inspired by Imua, where we help you master the waves of medical product development. Each week, we interview guests that educate, guide, and inspire so you and your product can get the skills you need to hang 10. If this is your first time listening, Imua is spelled I-M-U-A, and it's a Hawaiian word. It means to advance forward with passion despite rough waves. There are plenty of those in medical product development, but keep listening because we've got you covered. So happy Memorial Day. I am recording this episode on Memorial Day, and it's actually not that happy of a day for me. So my husband left to go to Afghanistan today, and so I'm just kind of struggling with that, and I'm going to be on my own for the next few months. Well, not on my own. I have Abby and I have you guys, and I'm just going to pour my heart and soul into serving you as best I can. And so speaking of that, at the end of this episode, you'll hear me talk about it. I'm going to remind you now as well. So if you're listening to this and you're just starting out, if you are just starting on that journey and you're just kind of gathering any information you can, or if you know of anyone that's just starting out too, I've got a fun little quiz to just test your medical invention idea or your technology or your product, whatever you want to call it. If you're brand new, this quiz is for you. So go to imua-services.com/good idea. There's no spaces there, and you can take that little quiz and let me know what you think. So this episode, like I said, today's not a very good day for me. I'm not very happy today, just feeling sad. And it's actually the perfect time to talk about mindset or mental toughness or faith, whatever you call it. And we need a lot of that in our industry. If you're trying to bring a medical product to market, it is not easy. And the path is full of rough waves, and that's why you listen to me, of course. So this reminds me of another episode I did. If you listen to episode 25, it's called Bringing a Medical Invention to Market, Personality Traits Needed. So you can listen to that too if you kind of like this one. I don't get into the emotions as much. This is more of the facts from just what I've seen. So you might be interested in that. Again, it's episode 25, and I'll link to it in the show notes. So this episode that you're going to hear is something special. So I was actually on someone else's podcast recently, and I've been going through just a rough time with this move and several big life changes just all happening at once, just kind of compiled on itself. And I just got bogged down there for a while. I'm doing great now. I'm on the up and up, and things are getting better. And like I said, these next few months when my husband's gone, I'm just really going to focus on serving you guys the best I can. But I wanted you to be able to hear that podcast episode. So I went ahead and took that episode and cut it so you can hear it today. And let's get started. So this is an excellent podcast if you haven't listened to it before. It's called Kate's Take. And Kate Erickson is a very, very, very important part of a company called EO Fire, or Entrepreneur on Fire. So I listened to her podcast, Kate's Take. And if you haven't listened to the other podcasts, it's just EO Fire. That one's a great one too. It's different than Kate's Take, but she equips entrepreneurs and just gets into the real tough stuff that happens and more of the behind the scenes stuff that's going on in any business, really. It doesn't have to even be anything that has to do with medical product, just anyone in general. So let's go ahead and dive into that, and I'll catch up with you once we're done.
Kate Sega listeners, welcome back to another episode of the audio blog. Thank you so much for joining me today for our first spotlight here in season 6. As you just heard today, we're going to be talking about how to manage mindset and stay motivated. And I have a very special guest that I've brought on today to help me discuss this topic. But before we dive into today's conversation, I want you to hear the voice message that Meghan sent me between season 5 and season 6 that after I listened to it, I knew I just could not pass up the opportunity to invite her on Kate's Take.
Hi, Kate. It's Meghan Alonso coming at you from Reston, Virginia. And I've had a hard time recently with just since we moved here and we're getting to know other people, staying busy and keeping myself motivated. I've felt kind of depressed personally and professionally. I think it just helps to be surrounded with other entrepreneurs. And I know you probably went through some of the same stuff when you moved to Puerto Rico. So I would really like to hear in season 6 just some of the mindset stuff along with ways to really connect with others when we work from home.
Okay, now I know many of you who are tuning in can probably totally relate to Meghan. I know I definitely can. Thinking back to when we first moved to Puerto Rico before we knew anyone on the island, this stuff is tough and it will derail your motivation. It will get in the way of productivity, and feeling alone is no fun. So throughout this entire episode, Meghan and I are going to be breaking this down, and Meghan's going to share a few of the tips and strategies that she's used to help her stay motivated, to help her connect with like-minded people, to really get back on track with her business. But speaking of her business, let's go ahead and hear from Meghan exactly what it is that she does. So, Meghan, before we dive in to the purpose of our chat today, I'd love for you to just give Kate's Take listeners an overview of what it is that you do in your business.
Sure. So my business, Imua Services, I help entrepreneurs and startups move their medical inventions to market.
So that's a super quick overview of what Meghan does, but to get her full background and to hear her story, because let me tell you, it is incredible. Meghan was on EO Fire episode 1567. I'm going to link up everything that Meghan and I talk about in today's post that accompanies this episode. You know where you can go for that. It's eofire.com/season and the number 6. So I know you're going to love Meghan's story. I wish we could have gotten into it in detail here on this Kate's Take episode, but I really wanted to focus on that mindset stuff. So, all right, let's get to it. Okay, Imua Services, what does Imua mean?
To advance forward with passion despite rough waves.
Whoa, is this Hawaiian?
Yes.
Okay, so you went from Texas to Hawaii to California, and now you're in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Holy wow, talk about a lot of changes. I kind of gave our listeners a little insight into this already, Case Take listeners, so you have a little background on Meghan already. Do you want to kind of expound on maybe some of the things you were feeling? Like if you could take yourself back to the moment that you were leaving that voicemail, maybe kind of like go a little bit deeper into some of those feelings that you were having?
Sure, and virtual hugs all around.
Yes.
to everyone. And yeah, it's been, I guess, almost 7 weeks, maybe 7 weeks ago since I left that. So, and I want to remember that feeling, just going forward and realizing, okay, this is where I came from, this is where I'm headed, and just keeping that in mind. So we had just made a cross-country move from San Diego area to DC area, and I just, for some reason, I thought it would be a lot easier than it was, but it was just pretty emotional. It was emotionally taxing and just draining, then financially draining as well. And not in addition to the move, my husband was active duty military and transitioned out and is defense contracting here in Virginia. And there was a time period where we didn't have his income. So I felt the pressure to, okay, I've got to be the breadwinner right now. And just the things that you go through with moves, like, okay, we didn't have our security deposit from our older place, and then we got to pay first month's rent, last month's rent, pet deposit, and set up completely new utility accounts where we have no credit history with
any utilities in Virginia. So everyone wants a big deposit, and that, and I had outsourced something really important in my business at the time, and the company I outsourced it to, just a lot of things happened with them, unfortunately, and it ended up being a huge disaster. But at the same time, they're salvaging it now, and I've got a new project manager that definitely is on top of it. But I just would wake up every day not really wanting to be here and just not really motivated. And
well, I mean, that when you talk about a move, the first thing that I think of is, just geographically, your surroundings and the space that you live in, which I totally think that we underestimate how much a part of our daily life that is in terms of our mood, how we feel, our motivation levels. The way that we set up our surroundings, whether it's conscious or unconscious, has to do with how we feel in that space. So not only taking yourself out of a space that you were very comfortable in, and not comfortable in the like get outside of your comfort zone type of way, but comfortable in, i.e. you felt great in your space, and now all of a sudden you're changing all that. But if that wasn't like big enough and huge enough of a change, you think about being in an area where you don't know anyone, being in an area where you don't know what's around you, like the location of the closest grocery store. I mean, I can totally relate having just, what seems like yesterday made our transition to Puerto Rico, because our transition is still happening 1 year later. All of those things add up, and they can be, like you said, very emotionally like taxing. So I can definitely feel your pain there. I'm sure there are so many people tuning in who have experienced a similar type move where, there's so much going on. Like, how on earth are you supposed to be like dedicated and focused in your business? Add on top of all of that, like this whole snafu that you had with your delegation and hiring, outsourcing something. So, can you talk a little bit then about like where your business was at when you moved, and like was there kind of a halting period where you essentially were like, okay, I have to just accept the fact that I'm not making any big moves forward in my business right now. Like, I just need to stay afloat given everything else I'm dealing with right now.
I was still trying to push ahead, and I thought, I can, kind of the superwoman complex, I guess. So I can do all this. And I was really motivated to keep pushing forward. That totally changed too. So I went from working with my biggest client, going into their office, actually, usually 3.5 to 4 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And just having that community all around me, to not working with them. I wouldn't say anymore. I still work with them occasionally, but it's not like it was before. And so preparing for that loss in revenue and just scaling that back. And then also just the change of habits of where I'm working from. But yeah, I definitely thought, okay, I'm going to still continue forward at Mach 1 in my business, which now I realize was just unrealistic.
Yeah. Okay. So like you also talked about in the voice message that you left that change of environment, like you said, you were going into an office, you were surrounded with other people, you had that interaction, and then going to what sounds like you were working by yourself from home pretty much all the time. What have you done since moving to kind of, I don't know, to fulfill
to facilitate that.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely thrive off of community, and I build it wherever I go. And it was a matter of just finding people to really plug into. So I started, I have a husky, so I take her to the dog park here, and just I make it so that I take her specific days at the same time. So I see the same dog or the same people, and she plays with the same dogs. So getting to know them, found a CrossFit gym, getting to know them. And what's made the biggest difference, which I'll get into later, but I found a good church home where I feel like, okay, that can feed me, and then I can kind of give back in that area too. And then there was, about 5 weeks after I moved here, there was a professional event that I went to in the city. I went into DC for it. And just, I work in the medical device industry. So it was fun to be back in there, and I saw some familiar faces and then got to know others that live here. And when I was there, I found out about another event the next week. And then I went to another event the next week. And that's when things really started to fall into place, and everything became more familiar and not as isolating.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I'm hearing you talk about, I think about your voice message when you were talking about that, just that feeling of like wanting to be around other entrepreneurs, other like-minded people. And you almost made it sound as though you weren't the type of person to put yourself out there. Like maybe you were a little more introverted, and, attending a meetup or taking your dog to a dog park wouldn't necessarily be something that you would do. But look at you, like all these awesome opportunities that you've created for yourself by putting yourself out there. And I mean, that starts way back with the voicemail period. Like you even taking the action to put your struggles and the way that you are feeling out into the world. I believe that has such a huge impact, and that it can encourage and create momentum around future activities to happen. So whether that voicemail was the first thing or the third thing or the 17th thing, look at all these other amazing opportunities that you've created for yourself to put yourself in situations where you can surround yourself with those type of people, and where you will make connections, and where one person will introduce you to another person, and where one event will make you aware of another event. And, all of these seemingly difficult things to do, which, don't get me wrong, they are hard to do. Putting yourself out there is very difficult sometimes, but it sounds like you've kind of embraced that.
Mm-hmm. And which is, I tell other people I went through a funk, because I am definitely the person that gets out there. And when I moved from Texas to Hawaii, this was when I was 23, and I had already researched groups to be involved in. And my second day on the island, I drove all the way across the island to meet up with these surfers, and we surfed together. And the people that I was staying with were just amazed. And during this move, I kept thinking, where is that Meghan? Like, why am I not motivated to do this? Mm-hmm. But I also kind of recognized, okay, this is a lot more transition that I went through, and so many things happening at once. Not on top of all of that, I was still going through some fertility treatments and had some crazy hormone issues too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, like the perfect storm of all the imperfect things happening. Okay, but so you sent me that voicemail, and you were going through all these, like having all these feelings and going through this experience, and then like maybe not even a month later, you came back and you told me that you felt like you were coming out of that slump, that you had, finally snapped out of whatever was making you feel unmotivated or depressed or whatever it might have been. And you actually said in your email that a miracle had happened almost 2 weeks ago. And this was at the time that you were sending me the email. You talked about a book that a friend had given you 12 years ago when you were making that move from Hawaii to California. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, and I want to preface this story by saying, that I love the Freedom Journal and I love the Mastery Journal, and they're very powerful tools, but they're tools at the end of the day. And you have to have the mental toughness and a lot of entrepreneurs use the word mindset. And for me, I had never really thrown around that term much until like the past year or so. But what it really is for me personally, and everybody has to find what it is for them. But for me, it's really faith. And if my faith is not centered, then everything else kind of gets off kilter. And that was definitely not centered during this whole transition period. And I was just kind of wavering. Again, I was just kind of isolating myself. And I went to church. I found a good church here. And my first time I thought, that was okay. I don't know if this is the right place for me. But I went back the next week, and that sermon definitely spoke to me. It was like, okay, this is for me. This is exactly what I needed to hear. And I went up to the pastor and I introduced myself, and he immediately said, oh my gosh, you need to meet my wife. And we just hit it off right away. And she invited me to a small group, and we really connected right there. And I remember her saying to me, you're here for a reason. You're here in Virginia for a reason. You're here at this church for a reason. And then as we were walking away, she said, oh, by the way, our small group is reading this book called Captivating. And I thought, oh my gosh, I love that book. And I completely forgot about this. So the book was given to me 12 years ago by a good friend as I was moving from Hawaii to California. And I opened the book and I forgot that he wrote this beautiful message to me inside. And he wrote it backwards. So I had to stand in front of the mirror to read it. And he wrote that. He said, I want you to stand in front of the mirror to read this because I want you to see the amazing, captivating woman that the world sees. And it was that was my miracle. That book spoke to me 12 years ago, and here it is.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's so incredible. When I read that email from you, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to know like how this book came back into her life, and like to think of the moves that you've made, the time that has passed. That's just really, really awesome.
Yeah. And my intention is not to get on here and preach by any means, but I do want to stress that those of you listening, you need to find what centers you, and that's going to be able to get you through the day-to-day grind and the day-to-day self-discipline of, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write down my goals, and then I'm going to do them.
Mm-hmm. Finding what's going to bring you back to like right now and right here in moments of frustration, depression, whatever it might be, lack of motivation, feeling like, why am I doing this, or why am I not doing that, or, any number of things any number of questions that we could be asking ourselves at any given point in the day. So if somebody's wondering how they can find out what that is for them, do you have any recommendations?
So there's a great video by Simon Sinek on finding your why. I'm not exactly sure if that's the title of the video, but it kind of talks about what is your reason for you doing what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really powerful one to watch. There's another great book called The Purpose-Driven Life that is written from a Christian perspective, that has the same message, but it's just kind of delivered in a different way. But just getting in tune with yourself and who you are as a person and what really drives you, and then that force of something greater than you.
K-Sig listeners, I hope that you are appreciating what Meghan's sharing with us today. She has been so open and so transparent with everything she shared today. And I really hope that her journey has not only resonated with you, but given you some motivation, given you some inspiration to really take a step back and, do something like watch the Simon Sinek video, do something like read a book that's going to help you find your purpose, because sometimes it's just about taking that step back. Sometimes it's just about reevaluating why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of the times that can help us get our mindset back on track. That can help our motivation flourish. So I hope that you will take 5 minutes, 10 minutes after this episode is over to just think Just think about the path that you're on, what it is you're doing with your business, why you're doing that with your business, and give yourself the opportunity to express why it is that you're doing what you're doing. I can assure you that will have a big impact on your mindset. It will have a big impact on your motivation moving forward. And let's go ahead and close this down. We didn't really get into it today because you've shared this beautiful chapter of your life that you're currently going through, for which we are so grateful. I know I speak on behalf of the Kate's Take listeners as well. Not everyone is that transparent, and to be real, we all have these feelings. So I really, really appreciate you being so open about them today, Meghan. So why don't you go ahead and, before we shut this down, tell us what you have going on.
My goal is to advance healthcare forward, and I'm motivated to equip, lead, and motivate 1 million entrepreneurs and startups in the medical product space to move their products forward by 2020. So, and I'm talking about not only working with people, but just people that listen to I have a podcast too called Inspired by Imua. So people that listen to that, people that read my website, that follow me on social media. So just kind of like that butterfly effect. But if you are interested in thinking, hey, I have this idea for a medical invention, I wonder what I could do with it, I do have a little quiz for you. So you can go to imua-services.com/good idea, and that'll take you through some questions that kind of validate your idea.
So I hope you guys gleaned a lot of good information from that. And just to realize that everybody goes through hard times as an entrepreneur and startup. It does get rough, but to always lean on others for support. And sometimes we may feel like shutting ourselves off, or not even shutting ourselves off, but just not being as open as we usually are. And when you maintain that sense of openness, when you invite others in to help, people really enjoy doing that. And it can be joyful for them, and it can be joyful and healing for you too. So I encourage you to do that. You can always reach out to me anytime you're going through this. And a lot of people won't talk about this. It's strictly business with some people, but I know from experience, obviously, that we all face this. And so we might as well talk about it and talk about strategies to manage it. So with that being said, until the next episode, Imua.
Mahalo for joining us. If you're new to riding the waves of medical device product development, or if you've been in development for a while already, Inspired by Imua is here to surf with you. Want to be a master of the waves? Text HANG10, that's HANGTEN, to 44222. We'll send you the most common wipeouts companies make in product development so you can avoid them and reach master wave status. Again, that's HANG10 to 44222. We publish a new episode every Tuesday, so catch us at inspiredbyimua.com. Imua!